Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and this is Dream Fights. This is where we pair up a couple of greats from the past or present, put them against each other and discuss and debate and break it down and reveal who we think wins and why. So I'm joined by my co-hosts as always, Grant Tassie Brown, Peter Mattiatis and Mike Altamura. How are we, fellas?
Good, thanks,
Great
mate.
to be on the show, guys.
Got a ripper one this week. This was yours, Mike. Actually, before we get into this week's fight, let's go back to last week because it definitely created a lot of discussion and a lot of probably our best poll yet. It was Jeff Fenech versus Lester Ellis. Probably no surprise here, but the Marrickville Mauler got over the line over the Master Blaster. 90% went for Jeff Fenech. So interesting one, Mike. Did you expect it to be a little bit closer?
No, because I think Jeff has so much more of a stronger public profile. I think that he's more revered in boxing circles. So I think if someone just sees that and pops it up, they're not really looking styles, everything. Just immediately their instinct is Jeff because, at least, you guys have said, he's our greatest fighter ever. He's a Hall of Famer, International Boxing Hall of Famer. So, yeah, it's not a surprise.
I still think Peter would have been, I think I said in one of the Instagram posts we put up, you talk about dream fights, that was the epitome of a dream fight, Fenech versus Ellis.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Too bad it just never happened.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, let's get on to this week's. And Mike, you're stepping up to the plate. Who you got for us?
We have Pernell Whitaker versus Terence Crawford. You can pick the weight. You can pick lightweight. You can pick 140. You can pick 147. Any of those weights, because both guys were prominent at all three weights. Crawford really made his name more at 140, becoming unified champ. Whitaker was unified champ at 135. Stopped at 140 for a cup of coffee and beat Rafael Pineda for the world title before moving up to 147. So you can pick the weight. I would say probably ideally 135 to 140. Match between these two. I just think it's a tantalizing fight. Just really, really interesting styles. And both guys are going to ask a lot of questions of one another that maybe they didn't really see in their careers.
Yeah, Tassie, it's amazing. We'll look at the records in a second, but very, very similar careers, almost parallel-like. And even the way they fight, everything else, it's probably one of those fights are almost like a mirror image of fighting each other, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bloody great pick by Mike. Very, Pernell is one of my favourite fighters of all time. He was probably my favourite fighter at the time in his career. Terence Crawford is one of my favourite current fighters and just both masterful boxers. Pernell was a southpaw. Crawford fights a lot out of the southpaw stance. He switches, but as I said, both unified at 130. Whitaker 135 and then Bud at 140 and then both went up, obviously 147. Where Bud is currently there and Pernell was champion there. Amazing, yeah. We'll go on the resumes a bit later, but it's a great pick.
Yeah, it is, isn't it, Pete? It's one of those fights. I mean, Crawford's obviously still very active, so he's got a long way to go before we probably can evaluate him in full. But just the thought of these matchups, as I said, it's almost like they are the mirror image of each other, aren't they? From the careers to the belts they've won, to the divisions they've been in. It's just an amazing matchup.
Yeah, it is. It's a hard one to pick. And also with Crawford, obviously we don't know his ceiling because he's ready now to get some real big fights and we'll see how he handles the big fights. If he can, really go to another level now and win some massive fights, obviously that lifts his status as well. So right at the moment, his ceiling's very high anyway. He's a pound-for-pound star. But we just don't know. I mean, if he goes on to beat Errol Spence easily and then moves up in weight and beats Charlo or whatever. I mean, there's still stuff there for him he can achieve. But if we're doing it right at the moment, it definitely makes it interesting because I've got that much respect for Pernell Whitaker. He was the best defensive fighter I've ever seen. Yeah. And he just knew, everything about boxing. He was a showman as well and he done what he had to do to win. So, yeah, real good matchup, this one.
Certainly is. Well, let's have a look at, firstly, Pernell Whitaker, Sweet Pea. 40 wins, 4 losses and a draw, 17 KOs. You can see there, lightweight, titles all the way from lightweight up to junior middleweight. So amazing career there. International Boxing Hall of Fame inductee in 2007. And Mike, just where do you start with this guy's resume? I mean, he fought everyone of his era, and just an unbelievable talent. Obviously, it started at the '84 Olympics and went from there.
Yeah, and you look, even two of his victories before he ever won a world championship was significant. So he stopped Miguel Santana, who was one of the top contenders in the world, and then also defeated Roger Mayweather, which to beat Roger Mayweather, who was then to be a future world champion as well, to beat him post Roger's first world title on the way up was a massive accomplishment, and it fine-tuned Sweet Pea. Sweet Pea, of course, his first world championship bout, Jose Luis Ramirez, bad decision in France, which is why for many years the discussion with Sweet Pea was, whatever his record, 35 wins with one controversial draw, one controversial loss. The loss was to Ramirez. He avenged it, beat him very easy in a world title unification at lightweight. The draw was years later up in weight against Julio Cesar Chavez, that probably not even the 60,000 Mexican fans at the Alamodome thought Chavez won that bout. I don't know how anybody could have carded that for him. So had a phenomenal career. I think that when you watch him, it's just the balance. I mean, such a slippery, slick fighter, but just so fundamentally sound. That jab, fast hands, balance, punched harder than people thought, but was so committed to using his feet and moving, especially at the lighter weights, like especially at lightweight and at 140 at junior welter. Just committed to the movement, but just beautiful because although he moved, he knew how to stand in front of guys and just make them miss by millimeters.
Yeah, he did. And Pete, as Mike said, he lost the controversial decision to Ramirez, but he got a fight with Greg Haugen a couple of fights later. And I remember watching it, and that is one of the most clinical dissections I think I've ever seen in a world title fight ever.
Yeah, look, Whitaker, what can you say about him? The guy was an absolute superstar, and the purists really respect him more than the fans, obviously, because the way he just used to move and the way he used to, he could duck underneath your knees. That's how good he can. He used to just toy with him and just put on an exhibition. It's so hard to beat. It would have been so frustrating for someone to fight him because you can't land your jab on him. He's never there, and he was really nice counterpuncher too. He had nice speed. He was super tough as well. We're talking about the late great Pernell Whitaker.
Yeah.
This guy was a living legend at the time. Just one of boxing's great fighters.
Yeah, Tassie, and he's one of those fighters too where he obviously ended up getting the big fights against Chavez and De La Hoya and all the rest of them, but he was one of those fighters that actually lived up to it all and really could have won all those fights against all those guys with a little bit more luck and a little bit more love from the judges.
No one really beat Pernell clearly. Look, the only one that had a clear win over Whitaker was Trinidad, and by then he was sort of past it and a lot smaller for Trinidad. But obviously ripped off his first title shot, but then he got revenge against Ramirez, who's a great Mexican fighter. Wins over Buddy McGirt, twice. Azuma Nelson to unify the lightweight division. What can you say about Azuma Nelson? Like Mike said, Roger Mayweather, great win. Greg Haugen. Chavez, he got ripped off, and that was the pound for pound. That was like Mayweather Pacquiao back then. That was the Ring Magazine, Whitaker, Chavez. Look, I can't speak highly enough about this guy. I spoke about him before.
Yeah.
I was in love with Whitaker. He's my favourite fighter. Southpaw slick. He'd make you miss. He'd just be right in front of you, make you pay. He wasn't known as a big punch, but he had a bit of pop. He took guys down. Mate, he was just everything. Just so brilliant. He was in my top 10 of all time. That's how much I rate him. And, look, so many big names he fought. And, look, he wasn't really a waterweight, but he went up to waterweight. We looked at the De La Hoya Whitaker fight here. Some had the draw. Some had Oscar. It was just a very close fight. But that was the later part of Whitaker too. He didn't do much after then. At lightweight, junior waterweight, near unbeatable. At lightweight, I'll go as far as to say it's out of him and Durant as the best lightweights of all time. And take your pick. I don't really know. So that's how much respect I got for Pernell Whitaker.
Yeah, no, I have to agree, mate. Well, let's have a look at his opponent. Terence Bud Crawford, you can see there 38-0, 29 KOs, pretty much the same career path as Whitaker. Won his first world title at lightweight. He's now at welterweight, so who knows if he'll go up to super welterweight or junior middleweight at some stage. We can see there, as I said, pretty much a lineal career path, the same as Whitaker, Mike. And yeah, it's, as I said at the start, it's unbelievable to think how similar their careers have been, and who knows which way Bud will go going forward, but how, very similar their careers have been so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting side note to Terence Crawford. So his first manager who actually handled his career to about a year and a half ago, Cameron Duncan, Cameron found out about Terence through Mikey Garcia. So Crawford had beaten Mikey Garcia twice in the amateurs. That's a knockout of Andre Gorges, which is one of his most under-the-radar performances on the way up. Just a phenomenal KO. But Cameron found out about Bud, and Mikey Garcia said to him, this guy's slippery, he's slick, he can punch, he switch hits, he's got everything. And that's essentially how he was sold as a prospect. So Cameron invests in him, takes him on management-wise. None of the major promoters wanted him on the way up. Golden Boy didn't want him, Top Rank didn't want him. And so if you go and look at his early career, it was on the club circuit. He built and built and built. Eventually, Top Rank took him. And then at late notice, he secures an opportunity on HBO against Breeders Prescott, who, of course, dangerous punching Colombian. Prescott had knocked out Amir Khan. And Bud, to that point, had never really boxed southpaw for the duration of a fight. He was mainly would be orthodox and was known as a heavy-handed kid. That was the first fight that he just stood there and turned the power puncher inside out for 10 rounds. And that really was the fight that set him on the trajectory that he went. Then, of course, the victory over Gamboa, where he overcame a lot of adversity first couple rounds. To backtrack from that, went to the UK, easily defeated Ricky Burns for the World Championship, and then the rest is history. He's just had a phenomenal career.
Yeah, he has. And, Pete, I was lucky enough to see him in person against Jeff Horn at the MGM Grand, and I hadn't really seen a lot of him up to that stage, I must admit. I was probably one of the ones that sort of took notice of him but didn't really watch him, but you could see him fighting Jeff there. He was just unbelievable. I'm not sure whether you've seen him live, but he's just something else, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Look, he's a superstar, and he's an athlete as well. He's got everything going for him. I just don't know where he's going to finish up at the end of his career. I think he's going to finish high. I mean, I know everyone says Canelo's the best pound for pound, which he probably is, but I've got Bud Crawford right up there as well. I think he fights Errol Spence. He beats Errol Spence. I really do. I think that's the fight he needs. He needs to go out there, have a super fight with Errol Spence, and I mean, I'll be hitting the bookmakers for that one. I don't think Errol Spence beats Bud Crawford, but who knows? Funny things happen in boxing. But going on this fight, this is a super matchup, and Crawford, he's hard to hit. He's starting to develop a little bit of power now as well in his punches, and he can finish an opponent. So, very, very interesting matchup, this one.
Tuzzy, how do you see it, as Pete said, as far as the pound-for-pound list goes, how do you see it? Do you think, I think we might have even touched on it in one of our shows recently, but do you see him as the pound-for-pound king now after the Porter fight, or do you still think that Canelo's number one?
Nah, look, I still have Canelo. Crawford was on my pound-for-pound number one a while ago.
Yeah. Before
Canelo's mad run. I mean, inactivity for Bud, no big names. Been on the opposite side of the fence with Top Rank, where all the other fighters with Heyman and PBC. I know he's going to leave now, but so Canelo's recent year and a half, 2 years of beating the guys like Saunders and Smith and even the most recent guy, I've got Canelo, but it's not a massive argument. If you come up and say Crawford, I'm not really going to argue with you because they're both awesome. So personal pick, I've got Canelo, but I'm not going to argue with anyone, not even Peter. If it's Crawford, it's Crawford. Like either or, they're both awesome. Both, won multiple divisions, both unified, both at the top of their game. Crawford's a bad man. I think he beat Spence. A couple of years ago, I might have had Spence, but now I've got Crawford. And if that fight doesn't happen, that's a shame for boxing. Hitman Hearns and Leonard fought each other at their best at waterweight. This is a Hearns-Leonard fight. fight needs to happen. They both got their own. They both got belts, both in their prime. It'd be real black eye for boxing if this fight doesn't go ahead. So Crawford's awesome, mate. As I said, there's a real weird sort of matchup Mike's picked because you got a guy who's current and a guy who's a legend from the past who's a pound for pound great. But this guy is amazing, but we don't know how much better he can be. Like, if he beats Spence and maybe goes up and beats a Charlo, I could be changing my opinion on this, but we'll get to that soon.
Yeah, Mike, before we get into our picks, do you think Crawford is now on the verge of getting those types of fights? I know he's been starved of them because he's been with Top Rank now. He's a free agent, of course. Do you see, apart from the Spence fight, there's plenty of other fights out there for him. Do you think he's now on the verge of being able to show us exactly how great he could be?
I could see PBC trying to work like a 2-fight deal. Maybe they work him versus Thurman first to build his profile on their networks, and then build towards, say, year-end 2022 against Spence. The only other real viable fight that's out there for him beyond those two would be Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor moving up from 140, of course. Undisputed, unified world champ at 140. But the thing is it's not a fight that moves the needle legacy-wise. So I think that he has to go out of his way to try and make the Errol Spence bout because, like Tassie said, it's the biggest fight in boxing. Both guys in their 30s. This ain't Hearns and Leonard who are going to have another 10 years post the fight. Plus, the time's now. Yeah. Enough messing around. There's no roadblock now. The time's now to move.
Yeah,
we're not doing a Mayweather Pacquiao stuff. That.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's hope we don't get another version of Mayweather Pacquiao because I don't think we could handle that one. So let's get into it, Pete. We're going to kick off with you. Yeah. Going to kick off with you. Who wins and why?
Okay, I see Whitaker building early rounds because Crawford's a notorious slow starter. He takes 1 or 2 rounds to warm up. And I see Whitaker, with his jabber movement, getting those 2 rounds up. I see it mid-round. By midway of the fight, I still see Whitaker round up. Bud definitely coming at him. But Whitaker, mid-range, finding, a bit more movement and round seesawing. But the fact that Whitaker won the early rounds up against Crawford and Crawford's slow start costs him and he loses a split decision.
Okay, so Whitaker by split decision.
Whitaker split decision for mine.
What do you think, Tassie?
Yeah, pretty similar. Look, very hard for me to go against Whitaker. Say again?
No draws.
No, I don't do draws. So very hard for me to go against Pernell Whitaker. As I said, whatever I say about him now isn't really what, like, as a kid, I really he was just obsessed with the guy. Around my era, a lot of guys like the more aggressive fighters, but I really liked a pure boxer like Whitaker. Bud's awesome, and like, Peter said, he probably gets off to an early lead, and Bud adapts a bit and, he switches a bit, but I can't see you beating Whitaker. It's probably close, probably like a split or a majority, but I got Whitaker beating him. I haven't got many people beating Whitaker, so Bud's awesome. Could be even better. We don't know how good he is yet still, but I've got Whitaker winning. But amazing fight, and it's a great pick. It's a really interesting pick because one's still going and one's sort of a living legend. I mean, not a living, unfortunately, but a legend of the sport. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mike, you said before the division doesn't really matter. What do you think would be the ideal division for them? Maybe in between, or what do you think?
Yeah, probably 140. They were both solid at 140, so I think that probably suits. And the interesting part with this fight is each guy brings an intangible that I believe the other never really faced. Whitaker never faced a switch hitter of Bud's credentials, where Buddy's really slick as a southpaw. He's gotten stronger out of the southpaw stance in recent years, but that used to be his slick side. And when he was orthodox, that was his power punching side. He's a little bit more squared up, maybe a little bit more vulnerable to hit, but he always had a massive overhand right and a big left hook. So we know a couple things with Whitaker. Whitaker down in multiple fights, down against Rafael Williams, down against Gary Jacobs, down against Roger Mayweather. He'd been down in multiple fights. So there is a vulnerability there. That's right. What we also know with Pernell, he's not going to do what everybody else is doing against Crawford, which is chasing him. He's not going to do like Sean Porter and walk straight into his wheelhouse, or Ray Beltran, or these guys that he's fought throughout the years. Jeff Horn walking straight into the kill zone to get hit. He's not going to do anything lunging. So does Crawford have the capability to sit at range and outbox him? I don't think so. I think Pernell is able to nullify. I think he's able to make him miss enough. If you look at the trend of Pernell's career through to his prime, which his prime probably concluded about 1995, when he generally dropped the rounds in fights, it's because he was taking them off. And he knew how to pace himself. He's not a guy that's going to be up 6 rounds to 3 and chasing and following you and walking into something stupid. The thing is, I can't see Crawford being able to outbox him as a southpaw. I think he's going to have to hunt for him. He's going to have to take some chances. We've seen Whitaker hurt. Crawford might be able to dent and hurt him punching as an orthodox, walk him down. Maybe that changes the complexion of the fight. But how I see it, I just think that Whitaker banks enough rounds, and then, yeah, they may be flip-flop late, but I see it like a 7 rounds to 5, 8 round to 4 kind of deal for Whitaker. And I know that's a big pick, because Crawford, one of the greatest attributes is his ability to adapt and his ability to turn fights that are even in his favor late. So this is more just banking on Whitaker's boxing IQ to be able to negate him.
No, good call. Well, I agree with all three. I think it would be a great fight. And I think both of them would probably be a challenge for both of them, because they're pretty much fighting someone that they've never really fought before by fighting each other, if that makes sense. But yeah, I agree with, I think it was Pete who said that Whitaker would bank the early rounds. Crawford starts a bit slow. I think the issue that makes me swing to Whitaker's side, though, is that when inevitably Crawford decides to pick it up, I don't think Whitaker's that type of guy who you can pick it up against. You know, he's got the range and the head movement, very hard to get momentum against, and I don't think Crawford really pushing the issue in the later rounds would make much difference. So I see Whitaker winning by unanimous decision, probably 8 rounds to 4. Great fight though, but I just think Whitaker, especially in his prime, would have just had too much for Bud. So I think that's a clean sweep, boys. That's Whitaker by decision, I think, by all of us. Tazzy, you had him by decision as well, I think?
Yeah, decision, yeah. I don't think Whitaker stops him. But, look, as I said, like you said, mate, like starting off slow against Whitaker, and if you're trying to force it later, you're only going to get probably counterpunched more. Yeah. He's a bad guy to be sort of forcing it against and getting desperate. So,
Yeah, and as they say, styles make fights, and in this case, I don't think Crawford's got the style to really close the gap. So there it is, guys. That was Crawford and Pernell Whitaker. Whitaker winning in a clean sweep by unanimous decision by decision by all 4 of us. Pete, that means we're back to you. Who have you got for next week's episode?
I've got an all-Australian epic,
and
it's current versus past. Barry Boy Michael at lightweight up against ferocious George Kambosos. Lopez. So
I love that one.
I'm going to be interested to hear how this goes. Obviously, Barry will be watching. Barry, all the best after you had a bypass.
Barry.
Yeah, go Baz.
Go Baz.
So that's a really good fight.
An all-Australian matchup. So I'll put my matchmaker's hat on and try to get a prize at their best.
Can I say something, Peter?
Yes.
I was flirting with 2 Greeks, Cassidy's versus Kambosos at lightweight. That would have been good too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would have been good. But I think Barry Boy, Michael, and Kambosos got that flavour, because you've got the British Aussie guy, or born in Britain, but a hardcore Aussie guy, and another guy that's a hardcore Aussie guy as well, covered in tattoos, Kambosos. So it's going to be a pretty interesting matchup.
Geez, Mike, the build-up would be pretty entertaining, wouldn't it? They both obviously got the gift of the gab, haven't they?
Barry will get under Kambosos' skin, without doubt. As much as Kambosos could irritate Teofimo Lopez, no one can get under Barry Michael's skin. No one. No one. Impossible.
Well, when you think about it, Tazzy, that Cambosis is a lot like probably a young Lester as well. Just an angry young man who just wants to take the world on. He's got all that speed and pizzazz and believes in himself. Who knows? Same case.
Mate, %, hit the nail on the head. He's very much like that, like a young Lester. And let's hope he doesn't go down the same path as a young Lester. Let's hope he's got better people around him.
I think he has. But no, that is an unbelievable pick, Peter, especially in the events of the weekend where Cambosis obviously has pulled up one of the best.
Just be ready for the quiz Thursday night, Peter.
Yeah.
Redemption's coming your way, son. Redemption's coming.
No one's gone back to back, Tassie. I've got to defend my title now.
I don't know if you know a movie. I'm going to quote it. Tombstone, about White Earth. Hell's coming. I'm coming and hell's coming with me, Peter. Hell's coming with me.
Looking forward to it, Tassie.
I like it, boys. Nah, great pick this week, Mike. Whitaker, Crawford, awesome. And I love the All Aussie fights. And I think there's a lot more All Aussie fights we could probably do going forward now when we come to think of it, especially when you've come up with that one. I like it. Barry and Cambosis, unbelievable fight. So look forward to that one. All right, guys, we'll leave it there. Thanks again, and can't wait till next week.
Thanks,
and
guys.
thanks again for watching. Thanks, guys.